and Bernie Flynn. Before I begin, I'm going to move line item 4C up to the beginning of the agenda, just to move this evening along a little bit better. So first, comments, suggestions by residents. Seeing no residents, I'm going to move on to discussion of the garage management monthly report. No, sorry, to 4C, which is to request the Business Improvement District allow free street meter parking for small business weekend, Friday, Saturday, November 25th and 26th.
Yes, John O'Brien, Executive Director for Westchester Business Improvement District. Thank you for indulging me by moving this up. This is some ask that we come before council every year for. Helps to the small business weekend is, especially for our retail community, is the weekend. It's where they make their money. So one of the, obviously we all know, one of the big hurdles in Westchester is parking. So being able to advertise free parking is a huge, huge bonus for our retail community, which is a part, often we focus a lot on restaurants in Westchester, but the retail stores is a very vibrant and important part of our local economy. And this would go a long way to help support them.
How do we feel?
I see no reason not to. Done it in the past. I think we should continue the momentum.
Is it the case that we used to do this just one day over Thanksgiving weekend, and now we're going to do it 2 days?
So I think traditionally we always used to use two days. Last year we only did 1 day, and in all honesty, I believe that's because I forgot and only asked for 1 day. But my understanding was a lot of times it was the 2 days. But I've only been here for 2 years, so.
Yeah, to be clear too, if people come to Westchester, it doesn't mean you can park in front of a fire hydrant.
Right, and it's not the garages. It's
Double
only
park.
street level. We're only talking about street level. So parking garages would still be the normal process.
Or park in a loading zone, or obstruct or create any safety
Right.
hazard. We're talking about waiving fees during the times that we would normally charge fees.
Right, it's like basically First Friday that, the borough normally does for First Friday.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, my 2 cents about financial decisions, and we're going to go over this in the director's report. We're having a good year in parking. So if we were not having a good year in parking, I might encourage council to not consider this request.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to 3, the garage management monthly report.
Good evening, Forrest Freeman with Reef Impark. As Sean mentioned, we are having a nice year when it comes to on the garage side of things. September did pick up. We had, kind of briefly mentioned that we anticipated that from August. There's a number of different reasons. There was a couple of special events which helped us, and also just people coming back to work. Of note is that the average ticket price for a ticket, and we'll get to the graphs in a few seconds, although we issued about the same amount of tickets, the revenue went up because our average ticket price went up, length of stay, higher ticket price. So which is all good things. We're not gouging anybody or anything like that. It's just volumes increasing. Monthly parking wise, we're relatively flat September and October. We jumped up a little bit from August. We do have a waiting list at Chestnut Street, which we're looking into because we have room. So there really shouldn't be a waiting list. We have 46 parkers. So I'll have more of an update on that next month, but we are, filtering them in. And some of that could also just be that they'd rather be at Bicentennial versus Chestnut, and therefore they're, not actually, taking up the offer for Chestnut Street. One of the comparisons, again, I like to look at is versus 2019. We're up month over month. We're having, everything looks good. If we look at them, the 2 facilities combined, we're up about 23% versus 2019, same month. We're up about 8% year to date. So it's, we're definitely doing very well. I'll talk about Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, 70 to 80% of 2019 at this moment. So the fact that we're ahead of that is very, very nice. When you start looking at the tickets, it kind of leveled out August and September, so they're pretty even. Going into the revenue, though, there was an uptick. And again, that relates to the average ticket price. Just, it jumped up, at Bicentennial, it was about 35 cents higher in September, and about, for Chestnut Street, about 40 cents higher per ticket. And again, some of that's related to the events, the 2 events that we had. Some of that's, again, related to the longer stays. And then, again, looking at it, things are tending up. We anticipate, September, October, November, we level out. December dips a little bit, without the students and things like that. But, we anticipate, this really continuing on. It was, 7.7% up month over month. We're 11% up month over month from July to August. So things are trending nicely. A question?
I normally don't have any questions for you, but we had a business meeting and I do have two questions for you.
Sure.
I'll start with the easy one first. The Chestnut Street Garage, you said we have a waiting list.
Mhm.
All right. When I go through there, floor 6, 7, and 8 are basically barren.
Yes.
Can you tell me, if we have a waiting list, why are those 3 floors totally vacant?
And what I would say is that, in having a waiting list, what we tend to do is, we reach out to the customers. And like I say, I'll get more information on it. But my anticipation is that they're not responding back. So even though we have a waiting list of 46 parkers, they might have found someplace else to park. They're not returning. So we just keep, cycling through that. So, because last month we were at, I think maybe 2 or 3 on a waiting list. And that was, again, an oddity that shouldn't happen. But yes, you are right. The top 3 floors tend to sit open. There should be no waiting list as long as people are interested in coming in. So it's us cycling through our waiting list and trying to, get those individuals. So
The Chestnut Street Garage, how many parking spaces do we have in there? Do you know?
689.
And how many monthlies do we have?
For October, 869. We used to be, and I'll say this, pre-COVID, we were over 1,000.
Right.
And again, some of it goes to, the diversity of the property, and there are people parking there during the day, Monday through Friday. We have, a handful that, nights and weekends. But even pre-COVID, 6, 7, and, the top 3 floors were generally, I'd say the top 2 floors were generally vacant, especially the roof. The roof's, every once in a blue moon, you'll find a car up there just because they don't want to park near anybody.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we do have some volume issues that we can still, sell.
Yes.
To get more spaces there.
Definitely.
The second question is going to be a little bit more difficult. You may not be able to answer it tonight. The students at Westchester University buying monthly passes there. The question is, the statement was that the students were not permitted to buy monthly passes. Is that still in effect, or are they allowed to buy monthly passes?
Excellent question. I will get you an answer. To my knowledge, they should be able, to purchase we don't require, it's not like the permit system in the borough where you have to show the proof of where you live and all that. I mean, anybody who comes in should be able to buy a monthly parking pass. I will verify that, just don't want to speak out of school, but there shouldn't be any issues with anybody buying a pass.
I like that, speaking out of school. Talk about Westchester.
Yeah,
But
a little pun.
on the back end of that, it was brought to my attention as a possibility that we could have a large influx of New Jersey and Delaware people buying passes for their kids. Because at one point, we were telling the kids they were not permitted to buy parking spots in the garage for monthly, for the year to warehouse their cars. And that was, I don't remember, probably pre-COVID. We've lost 2 years, so who the heck knows what happened.
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of New Jersey and out of state
Yes.
people, like parents buy the parking passes so their kids have a spot to put their warehouse their car during school.
Let me look into it again.
I didn't expect you to know the answers because I didn't prep you on the questions.
No, not a problem. But yeah, let me look into it and we'll get
Yeah,
back to you.
we'll talk about that next month.
Okay.
Thanks.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
May I didn't have a chance for us, I apologize, to look at the details with the garage monthly reports, but our net revenue is a little down. Did we have a lot of expenditures in this month's cycle at the garages? more so
Um,
than usual? I know that we route a lot of maintenance. And
There,
sometimes that's seasonal. I'm just curious if there's a story there.
and off the top of my head, I don't have the exact answer, but I do believe there has been a lot of equipment maintenance and related to the revenue control equipment. So I know there's been some catch-ups on that, but I can get you an answer and I'll shoot it to you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And the director's report.
So I wanted to highlight, just have a conversation about revenue and expenditures in the parking fund for the director's report this month. There's the familiar budget versus actual sheet that we go over every month, which highlights 3 of our major revenue categories. Again, we're outperforming budget on all 3. Mostly the parking garage net revenue is really beating budget by 15 to 20%. Parking revenue from the meters is up as well over budget. And we actually climbed out of the hole on parking ticket violations. And that's directly related to an uptick in our student population in the borough. You can see that trend if you look across the parking ticket revenue. It decreases in winter, picks up again in spring, and then goes away in the summer, and then picks up again. It's seasonal to reflect that cycle of students. And I imagine it's not just our Westchester students, it's all families that are sending students around. We're just around more when our kids are in school. But instead of just focusing on 3 revenue items and making a broad conclusion, I think it's time of the year that we start looking at the actual budget versus actual reporting across all of our revenue and expense categories so that we can have a more informed discussion. The good news is that, yes, we are having a good year in parking. As you look at our 3 major revenue categories, we're outperforming budget. But if you look at all of our revenue categories, we are outperforming budget. We have earned 84% of budget through 75% of the year. So we're about $400,000 more or less ahead of budget on the revenue side, mostly because we are outperforming in just about everything that you're seeing there. I wish we made a little more interest, but I think we should be able to do that. The parking lot revenue line item there is mislabeled, really. That should say something like leasing and permits. So that's the permits that we sell our residents, guest pass permits, as well as the leasing for our surface lots all go into that number. So I think we need to look at that for next year's budget, make sure we got a better number in there because we really are performing well. So I want to get to the bottom of that one. And that's the exercise that you should be using this budget versus actual report for. You should be asking questions about why are we so above or below on certain things? Why are we trending off the charts? Or we should be hitting through 3/4 of the year, we should have been spending and earned about 3/4 of our budget, unless the item comes in a seasonal or different kind of way. On our expense side, bottom line expenses are trailing budget by about 2%. So we spent about 73% of expenditures to date. So our overall net revenue to date is about plus $500,000. Now we do have a big bill coming with our principal payment on some of our long-term loans. Those are loans to pay. Those are 30-year loans that we refinanced. So actually we turned them into 40-year loans. For the garage construction, that was, I think we were starting at around $10 million in principal for those loans. And those were refinanced in 2016, most recently. We have a big principal payment due on those. And our capital project line item looks like it's over budget, but that's only because we spent capital dollars this year that we had budgeted to spend last year. So if we really want to balance this seesaw correctly, I should have put in on the revenue side those dollars that we reallocated again to this year to pay for the parking meter upgrade and the work that was budgeted for but not finished yet at Bicentennial Garage. So the bottom line is we're doing rather well. There are some things that are trending a little high on expenditures, and that's our bank fees. So I want to look hard at that, get a better budget number in there, or see if we can do anything to control costs. You don't get anything for a bank fee other than transactional convenience. So we should be shopping that around. I just hate losing $82,000 to $100,000 a year just to have our transactions processed. Our parking garage maintenance budget, I think, needs an increase. I had thought in my first year working with the borough that we had compounding problems with our elevators. They seem to be generating a lot of bills, and that seemed to have quieted off, but now we have other maintenance issues popping up at the garage. So as we do more of this, as we look back at more history, we get a better maintenance number. We incorporate inflation into those costs. I think we'll be in a better position to budget for that appropriately in years ahead. Your debt payments remain somewhat constant year over year, but because our debt is in the form of a bond, sometimes our interest and principal payments fluctuate a little bit within a range of less than 5%. So you don't always see the same amount of interest and principal payments year over year. Those change from year to year. I have nothing else I want to highlight in your budget, in this budget conversation, other than to say I'm happy with how this is trending. We talked a lot about last month about how important the parking department and parking fund operations are to overall operations in the borough because of the nearly 10% subsidy to the general fund. And I think it's with good management of the parking department that we can, continue to rely on that income stream for the general fund. And I'll take any questions if you have them.
I have a question, Mr. Metric. You called out the bank fees, but I also see on here postage and printing are pretty high. Do you have any explanation for that?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I don't think my answer covers all of the overages, but we did have an unusually large amount of paving that we did this year. So when we do paving projects, it generates a lot of printing expenditures. And that's my explanation for now. But we may just not have a bad budget number in there. I don't like to be, like I was saying, when I put the dartboard picture up before, being 200% off on an annual item isn't good enough. You want to be within 10%, 5%, and less if it's a big number.
I'm sorry, did you say paving projects, as in public works paving projects?
Yeah, correct. We'll go and post the road ahead of the project so that the cars can be removed from the roadway. So we're posting every street that gets paved in the borough. So usually, a dozen or a dozen and a half signs go up on every block.
All right, I got 3 questions for him. How are we doing with the interview process for a new parking director?
We're doing great. I would say something offline to you about it if you don't mind, because it's still a work in progress. But we've had some good resumes come in, and interviews have been conducted. We're scheduling some more. And that's about all I want to say publicly about it.
The workload is getting larger and larger in your department, and you kind of need some help.
Agreed.
It's about time, we move forward. Forrest, I didn't see your resume for the new parking director. I know you'd have to take a pay cut to come here, but you would love working here. The, did we agree or did we just discuss raising the parking meters 25 cents?
We didn't agree or discuss that. I just mentioned that if you were, we were thinking about long-term fiscal management and where that new money was going to come from to meet our naturally increasing costs. And one possibility is to raise the hourly rate from $1.50 to $1.75. And that would generate about $500,000 of new revenue every year. But that also has to be measured against what you can't raise prices so high that you destroy demand. And there might be a more nuanced way to do it when our fabulous new parking director is hired and comes on board. By that, I mean, you could have congestion pricing worked into your parking meters. We have the ability to do that. So maybe at our most popular times, you're spending $2 an hour, and maybe at our least popular times, you only need to spend $1 an hour to park in the borough, and the net benefit is an increase in revenue. There's different ways to approach the problem.
So you probably figured that we'll wait till the new director comes in and start bouncing that kind of stuff off of that person. And the last thing is council agreed to raise the flat lot price for the county. Have they been notified, and at what time did they balk at our increase?
They wanted an explanation, and we communicated with them about that. And I don't recall if it was agreed to or signed by the county yet, but we were in process of doing that. And my expectation is they'll agree to that increase, but I can't speak for the commissioners.
I wanted to ask about the legal fees line. It's not huge, but what are the legal fees that are? I have legal fees. Budget of 5,000, actual of 15,000.
Legal fees has got to be one of the hardest things to budget for, because you never know what's going to happen in the coming year. And if something happens, you're on the meter at $175, $200, $320 an hour, $640 an hour, whatever the rate is to resolve the matter. So there were two cases that have driven this cost up. And one was a case, dispute arising from an individual who was cited for parking on the sidewalk. And another was with an individual who actually came in from out of town, parked at one of our surface lots, and challenged one of our ordinances on a technicality. And we made some changes to the way our violations were written, but that incurred some legal fees. So those two right there probably account for $12,000 or $13,000 of that number. And that's just two cases. And we write hundreds a day, hundreds of violations a day.
Insurance, the workers' comp insurance at all involved, but that's just a separate issue.
I think that's a bad budget number.
Okay.
A workers' comp insurance number should be pretty easy to generate for a budget because it's based upon your payroll.
Okay.
So as long as you know what your expected payroll is for persons employed in that class, you can calculate it. You get the renewal from the workers' comp, and it's that easy. Yeah. The last time we haven't gotten our new renewal yet, but our last renewal, and I was really pleased when I came to work for the borough, our experience modifier for workers' comp is less than 1.0, which means we are less risky than the average employer in our industry. And it's all based on claims. If you get a lot of claims in, your experience modifier hedges above 1.0, and you actually have to pay more for the same insurance than others in your field.
That's good. So, thank you.
The follow-up on the legal fee thing, The two items that you did mention, how did they fare? How did we make out on the two?
One matter is settled and other matter is ongoing.
Okay,
We did talk offline about
Okay.
the ongoing matter.
Oh, and I wanted to say one more thing about the bank fees. From where I'm sitting, paying bank fees is, of course, you should shop it and try to find the best rates, but offering people coming to our borough the convenience is huge. It's making parking here easier in any way is a big plus. So whether they're parking at the meters or at the lots or at the kiosks, providing a convenience is worthwhile. And the more we can do, in my mind, the excess income from parking, at least a portion of it, should be going back to making parking easier and more easier than it is now. Because I think we have a lot of little opportunities of making things more consistent and more comfortable and easier for older people who claim they can't figure out how to use kiosks and younger people who don't have cash. We just need more and more and more. So thank you for everything that you've done. And I'm, it's depressing to pay all the bank fees, but I think it's worth something. Thank you. And then we need to consider the no parking zone on South Adams Street at East Neal Street.
Our Director of Building Housing wanted to bring this issue to the attention of the committee because as the plan review has been moving forward and preliminary plan approval is being considered by council, we've been thinking about the circulation patterns around this site and how traffic is going to enter the site and exit the site. And the dominant traffic pattern is going to be entering from the southeast quadrant on this map, proceeding north on South Adams Street, and then entering the site from either of the two driveways on the western edge. The part of the site that looks kind of like the state of Nevada there, the little below Carson City, would enter through there. Right now, South Adams Street is not heavily traversed. There's no housing on it. And not that it's forgotten, but it's kind of in a spot that no one really thinks too much about. And there's no parking regulations there. So it's used for long-term car storage by visitors and residents. And that's fine. There needs to be places in the borough, and that's an appropriate place for that kind of activity because it's out of the way. Because the traffic is so light on that road today, the way it's being used is okay because two cars can approach each other on South Adams Street and navigate the roadway. However, South Adams Street, the cartway is 34 feet wide, and you need about 8 feet for a parking space on either side width, and that leaves only 9-foot wide travel lanes. So the only way that works is if people really slow down, find little gaps in the line of cars and maybe nudge over a little bit and let each other pass in the infrequent moment that two cars actually meet at that location. And as long as your parking utilization is low, that's a perfectly fine way to manage a street. But with the increased traffic that's going to be coming to South Adams Street and the fact that you're going to have deliveries and 53-foot trailers, we've begun to think it would be a good idea to restrict parking on the eastern side of South Adams, leave it on the western side of South Adams. In that case, if you agreed to that, there would be 8 feet for parking, which would leave 13 feet for travel lanes. And that's a good distance. That might even be what the minimum PennDOT requires for roadways with a curb. So that's a good number. 13 feet is good. You can run a tractor trailer down a road and someone else can drive the other way and they can meet somewhere on that road and not have an issue. It would be a loss of parking, obviously, and we wanted to bring it to your attention this evening to discuss, and Kevin Gord also will be at Smart Growth tomorrow evening to discuss it as well. But since it's an action that would affect our parking ordinances, we thought it appropriate to bring up tonight.
It sounds very logical. I don't know that area intimately. I've been there. I've driven down that street. It's quiet and that's that. So I would want to look at it again and
Yeah, the South Adams side on the east side, as Mr. Metrick mentioned, that's pretty much the storage area for the college kids during the week. On the weekends, it's pretty vacant right along that area. Some contractors do leave their construction trucks along that tree line. It's a nice little shady area. I never took the time to actually count how many vehicles are there because they've actually overflowed into the train spot where the loading dock is now. The students have actually migrated across the street. So my guess is probably about 30 cars. So those 30 cars and trucks have to go somewhere. So it's, and then there's housing up the block. I'm not so sure that the people that live in those houses put their construction trucks down there because there's no room for it across from National Foam. Yeah, I think, we need to, like you said, look at it a little bit more closely, for that space. Because we don't want to disenfranchise the people that live in those houses along that block either.
Yeah, that's my concern is, how many of those cars belong to residents versus students? And where are those cars going to go? Right? If they're there now, are they, where are they going to go? They're going to go into other parking areas and create contention that we already have, right?
So maybe we can think about some solutions that don't disrupt the parking supply in the immediate vicinity and also get you some parking counts in that area. Okay.
I think parking counts are huge. I think safety wise, it's almost necessary with the trucks that I'm imagining coming into this. They're not gentle. That's not going to be something that can do a single lane situation quietly passing one another. So yes.
Yeah, you are correct. They would be approaching mostly from South Bolmar Street from West Town Road. Yeah. They wouldn't be coming in.
And if that's, I need to look at a map and like walk this area, but if that's the case, then I say keep the cars parked on both sides so that they can't come down there, and say a no truck, put a
During
no
the
trucking sign.
presentation from Eli Kahn Company, what they told us was that the cars would come off 202 and go into Bomar Street and go in, and if you look at the right-hand side of the picture, go in between the two buildings. They said that they would not, when they leave, sometimes they would leave to come down South Adams to the bottom, go across Niels and get right on 202 in Bomar. He said that they would not permit them, they'd have a no-turn lane for the trucks to go north on South Adams Street. So they couldn't go past the houses. You can only go left, you can't go right, the trucks. I can't answer that, Mayor. Yeah, during smart growth, I'm sure tomorrow we'll talk about it. Yeah. Like I mentioned, Mr. Lowe did tell us that, that the trucks would not be able to go north through the neighborhood, by the row houses there. They would only have a turn lane in the middle of those two buildings. You can only go south and then go back on the 202, on the 202. But like I said, that, we all agree that that needs a little bit more study on that whole thing.
Yeah, for me, I need to like look at a map and be walking I need to feel that whole space and really understand what they're proposing. I don't want those trucks going through neighborhoods. I think that's horrendous. I want a business in these spaces, so I'm I'm still for these spaces. I love the idea of building spaces that can really foster holding product and shipping and being part of a smart growth, future looking community. But we cannot infringe upon the people who are living here already. And I need to understand what is really going on this block that we're discussing tonight. And I want to talk to Eli Kahn about if he really needs trucks moving in that direction.
One of the things that I think we discussed during smart growth was, no trucking signs. We have them on Ashbridge. We have them in other areas of the borough. And I know that, they're only as good as you enforce them, but that would help deter, I think, keeping some of the traffic, if not all of the traffic, out of the residential area. And I think Mayor DeBaptiste raises a good point around, and maybe I just haven't seen them, so I'll accept responsibility for that. But in addition to the space the warehouses that are being developed, what other enhancements are being done to that property? When we saw the warehouses previously with the previous proposal, there were trees and bushes and sidewalks and all kinds of things. And I don't see that here. So I'm just and not that a warehouse you can pretty it up, it's like putting lipstick on a pig, but you can do something.
My understanding of this, I'm I'm going to argue with you. I can make a beautiful warehouse, but, but that's a separate discussion. My understanding with this remediation problem is John O'Green Park and this piece of property are in the same situation, and it's required that these things just be paved over. I think that is atrocious. I think there are things that could have been done. I don't understand where this is really, like, what the real language is around that. But that was, I asked about this property, and that was what the response was. The whole thing has to be paved. Sean, do you have any insight into that? The requirement of paving the whole properties?
I know there's this site is managed under DEP Act 2. So there is a plan that has to be followed for any reuse of the site. Not all of it is being paved in the plan. And I know there's a stormwater facility planned between the two buildings, underground stormwater facility you won't see from above ground. We should look harder tomorrow night at the landscape plan as well. There's requirements for street trees, and there should be some buffering done on the northern end. But those are all very important details. I've always thought that the big issue on this one, like the mayor said, is circulation and traffic. What can we do to make sure big vehicles aren't going through residential neighborhoods? I can get on board with that. Yep.
So, Mr. Metro, can we ask Mr. Gore for an update on the Davis property tomorrow?
Yep.
Mayor, the certain, all I can tell you is from what I looked at the map, and you asked a question about why is it happening in the second ward? And if I'm correct, and Mr. Metric could be able to help me out with it, in that corner of the borough, that area is called, all of a sudden, now I forgot what it's called. No, commercial. It's a commercial sector over at that area because they had the junkyard that was over there for a long time. Then you had the one guy that bought the place where the senior center is. He bought that and covered that over because but that, I mean, that was the industrial area that I remember seeing on the map. Doesn't excuse anything. It's just that, and now, they're building those townhouses on those sites that they can build on, make a profit on.
Is this working?
But, so,
I don't want to speak for Mayor DeBaptiste, but I think the point that she was making, Councilman Flynn, is that that is a historically Black neighborhood. Or, and that is historically where all that industrial space has been relegated to, because it was the neighborhoods and the people that were least cared about.
And if you want a history lesson, I can tell you what the neighborhood used to be called, just like they had names for neighborhoods of all of Westchester. But I'm not going to do that now. But my point is, historically, commercial property was relegated to the second ward. Least resistance. We weren't empowered, didn't have a voice. Predates the ward system. But my point is, now this council has the opportunity to do better. We know better, we should be doing better. And that is my point. We should be doing better. We should be holding the feet to the fire to the new owners of Davis property, because it's come look. You take walks, come look.
Can I,
I would invite you to come look.
oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Come look now,
Mhm.
because it didn't get better. The new owner has done nothing. And I don't know what they intend to do with the property, but I don't think anyone cared what they intend to do with the property when they sold it. But that's beside the point. We need to be doing something about it.
Well, get back to the parking on South Adams Avenue, the detail that Mr. Metric mentioned and Ms. Dorsey's on Smart Growth, there are certain requirements. I sat through some of the meetings. There's certain requirements that they have to follow because of the contamination of the ground. A lot of it's been remediated, but it can't be 100% remediated if I remember all the correspondence. But the tree beautification, the sound barriers for trees and stuff like that, instead of just putting up a tree where sound goes through it. But we don't want to put up fences because that gets ugly and they don't take care of it. Arborvitaes or trees of that nature that can block what we see. What I'm looking at here, if you're just talking about the parking, if you look directly across the street and you see a Dewey Pile, that's what I see. That's what I see is coming here. Another a Dewey Pile type of situation, which isn't really nice looking. But you can only block things so much with arborvitaes and trees and stuff like that.
so Mayor DeBaptiste, you know that I want everything beautiful, and not everything can be beautiful, but in my mind, this property is warehousing for e-commerce, which is sort of a retail experience. And being on the bid and being a part of the community involvement of the bid, it breaks my heart that the bid ends where it does and it doesn't continue down all the way. You know, there's a whole side of town that is not a part of the bid. And I see this commercial part north and south of Gay Street. It doesn't matter. This needs to be addressed similarly to the way the bid addresses the section of Gay Street that is commercial. That's commercial. This is industrial, right? Industrial businesses in our borough shouldn't just be allowed to look like a Dewey pile. not,
To your point, I have a machine shop that sits in my district. It's called Gasco. And you wouldn't even know it's there. It's on South Everhart Street or North Everhart Street and Gay and Market. The owners of that building are meticulous about it's connected to the Cornerstone Church. They are meticulous about what goes on there. They have trucks come and go all the time. But, you know, that comes down to management. I mean,
Right.
of that. You would not even know it's in a residential area.
yeah.
What we're getting here is a very large industrial space that we have to protect, as I said earlier, the residents in the block north of this, not so much the new townhouses, the houses across the street from the old brickyard that keep getting rebuilt, which is nice. I mean, I don't remember which street, it could be Union Street or Bernard Street, right? The one that north of that. But we can't allow any large vehicles to go north. They have to go south. And the beautification has to do with, you know, smart growth. You know, they have to, if they need to hammer something home, I'm sure the developer will be willing to do it. So.
My request in response to Mayor DiBaptiste is about making an effort on the east side of town to acknowledge that they're a part of Westchester and that our community, it's not that big. I don't know why we are stuck where we are. You know, the bid has its limitations and the bid does a wonderful job managing their little bit that they are, but there are commercial businesses down Gay Street. There are industrial properties that are in neighborhoods, and all of this affects the community experience of our borough. And I think that it's important that we make an effort to elevate the experience. When I was a teenager and I went to Henderson High School, I had a friend visit from Vermont. I took her for a walk into town and she loved our town. And then I showed her my high school and she said, I thought that was a prison. What they have done to Henderson High School is amazing. It's shocking to me that it's still the same building, but they did such an impressive facelift. There are opportunities in the rest of the borough of the industrial areas that look like that prison high school that I went to that was wrapped in barbed wire. There are opportunities to improve that. And so I just hope that that is something that we can all together make an effort to do more of. And we're in parking. Okay, so we consider that.
Smart growth has to take a deeper dive before we talk about stopping parking. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to approve the September 2022 Parking Committee meeting minutes. And then discuss the request for inclusion of loading zones at 200 East Market Street.
Yeah, that'll fake me out there. My view on it, staff's view on this is pretty simple and square. Linear feet in your downtown's worth about $150 to $175 per linear foot per year. So any loading zone has to consider that appropriation of public space for private purposes. A loading zone is very hard to take away. I would advise us to continue on the route of putting in metered spaces and monitoring their usage and seeing where we go from there. However, I know the gentleman that brought this up is not here tonight, so maybe we could table this item. Suggestion?
I could table it. I do have the way we do loading zones, is there a way, hearing the request from the library and then looking at this request, loading zones, can they be an income stream rather than just a loading zone? Can we somehow charge businesses for loading zones?
That's exactly where I'm going with this. If there's a monetary value to the private enterprise abutting a loading zone, what's that value? What should we price it at? Should it be something on your fee schedule that you price every year? Who pays the fee?
If we sell the loading zone to a specific business and then charge them the potential revenue that we could have made at a parking meter, can we do that?
Monitor who's going to, like in that same block, Lorenzo's down the corner, get a hoagie. I could pull in the loading zone, sit there for 10 minutes while I run down, run back. And nobody's going to police it to, you know, if I'm paying money for a specific spot, I want that to be available. What I did not do is go look at the rear of the building to see if there's parking behind the building. Because if they bought this building, where are all those people going to, the employees, where are they going to park? I'm sure they're not going to park out on the street. So they may be behind the building. I don't know.
There
Not
is a little
sure.
parking area back there, but I don't know whose it is. And
Yeah, I don't know. So
I-
I don't feel comfortable making a decision on a loading zone until I look at the rear of the building. Yeah,
I'm not saying the loading zone fee would be specific to this building. I'm saying generally, start up a loading zone that we can make an revenue from rather than, and they would belong to those specific businesses, and the businesses could call in if someone is inappropriately using their spot. I think it's, rather than giving out loading zones, or have a loading zone on every block, one per block on all of our blocks, and charge a fee to the businesses on that block that they have to share for that one loading zone, and nobody's allowed to put their name on it. I am confused. Some of the loading zones, don't they have business names on them?
I think there's a name that, you know, because I go around and pick up trash. So I look at all the loading zones and the curbs. The only thing that has a name on it is when Mayor Herron was here, we had a Uber and a
Right.
Lyft company that could use those spots, and it specifically said those kind of companies could use those spots at nighttime. But all the loading zones just say loading zone, and they're basically on all the corners. Like there's one right in front of Benny's and Mullane Shop, across the street from Fairman's, you know, there's one there. And there's one across the road for William, you know, the diner, Penn Diner. There's one on that block there. Yeah, so there's quite a few loading zones around the,
What about Carlino's? That's the one that I feel like has a name.
Carlino put their own sign up.
How is that acceptable?
It's easier to ask forgiveness and permission. And they had it up during the holidays, I think. I think that's what they did. Yeah. So,
No. What do we do about that? What can we do? That
the new parking director will have to dive into that, yes.
Yeah, I'm like, there's definitely, Carlino's has Carlino's name on it. I got there. Okay, so I would like to discuss creating a revenue stream of some sort from the loading zones. And we can table this or just have.
I just had a thought. We charge the businesses $150, Mr. Metric, $150 a year. That's all we get for the businesses. You know, even the bars and everybody, we get a business fee of $150. Am I correct? As a business tax. Yeah, I think it's $150. What we could probably do is think about increasing that to $175, and that takes care of the loading zones. But that way there, any business could use the loading zones, because you don't want it to turn into a Hatfield McCoy. You know, who's going to use the loading zones? Yeah, they're pretty much per block.
Mayor DeBaptiste.
While you're talking about loading zones, is this a parking issue where they put the bump outs, you know, the restaurants put the bump outs for them to use? Is that a parking issue? What issue is that? Because they taking up parking when they do that, right?
They pay a fee.
Right, I know they pay a fee, but do they come before parking to do that?
They go to building and housing.
Building a house, because my point is, if, when you're taking a look at all these kinds of things, we really need to look at that again, because in certain blocks, the same business gets it year after year after year, and other businesses don't even have an opportunity to get it. You know, because every year it's given to the same, like in the block where the social is, they get it, but Taco Mar doesn't even have an opportunity to get it because there's, you know, they get it and Avalon gets it. So my point is, we need to take a look at how we do that if we're going to continue to do that, so that there is some sort of fairness involved with the restaurants, so that it's not just the same restaurants all the time having the ability to do the bump outs and pay for it, if others want it also. So I might be out of place.
No, it's related, and worth discussing, but, yeah, so I would sort of table the discussion specifically about the 200 East Market Street request, and I want to do more digging into creating a revenue stream from the loading zones and Carlino's loading zones. Other business?
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Other than revenue, why do we have meters and kiosks on the streets?
My thought is to manage turnover and revenue, which matters quite a bit to the borough.
I agree, that's historically, I've seen abuses when meters are not enforced.
Thank you. All right. If there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned at 7:35.
You're welcome, Mayor. I was realizing.